What is the worst thing a teacher ever said to you? I grew up suffering from ADD and panic attacks, and for 1 year 5th grade I had to go to some classes to help me cope with people's special ed classes. Yes. The teacher was a child psychologist who believed you had to be tough on kids to get them to integrate better. One day I had a pretty rough panic attack, to the point where I couldn't even leave the school without just panicking and hyperventilating. The teacher, Mr. O, picked me up by the waist of my pants and carried me like a grocery bag down a hall, opened a room and threw me in. My face hit a desk and my face was cut up. He locked me in the classroom until my parents got there, where he and other teachers claimed that I was being violent to other students, even thought I had left after the other students because I had to take a different bus due to the classes. 3 teachers and the assistant principal took my mother aside and said I was a danger to the school and that I was never to return, and that the cuts on my face were self-inflicted, and that I ran into the room and locked myself in there, regardless that the room had to be locked by a key and only from the outside. I was removed from the school and had to finish in remedial classes at another school across town and then go to summer school. Apparently, the teacher and the principal sent out letters to PTA members that their children should not associate with me. It took my parents a long time to convince the school district to allow me to go to 6th grade, because from the school's side the story had become that I was hitting teachers and threatening other students. Years later I had to pick up my brother from school, and that same teacher, Mr. O, came out and saw me, and called the police, who questioned me about stalking the teacher. He then began ostracizing my brother and harassing him for the next year. I saw him last year. I put a brick through his car window. Too long, didn't read. Teacher threw me against a desk, claimed I did it to myself, got me expelled, harassed family. Edit. I honestly felt very alone after all of this. It's been several years, but these events still affect me, and so many of you. I feel far less alone now that I know how many this, or worse, has happened to. Love you, Reddit. When my little brother was in junior high, he wrote an incredible short story about the end of the world. At the end, a huge bomb explodes and kills most of the life on Earth. The school tried suspending him, saying he was at risk for blowing up the school and he needed psychological help if he was writing about the whole world dying. My mother was outraged. She refused to sign any suspension paperwork. They told her my bro was still suspended, so he wasn't allowed on school grounds for 3 days. My mother escorted my brother to each one of his classes for those 3 days. Once, in the 7th grade, 2 popular girls locked the teacher, who everyone hated, out of the classroom. She stormed in and demanded to know who locked the door. No one said anything. She then singled me out. She hated me and said that I would get a week's worth of detention for this because I hadn't ratted out the girls who locked the door. I protested because the rest of the class hadn't said anything either, and I didn't lock the door. She then took me into the hall and said one of the most traumatizing things. She told me no one liked me, no one would ever like me, and that I would never have real friends. Now this was all true. I was the least popular kid in school, but hearing her say it was like a punch in the gut. I just stood there and cried. At bathroom break in 5th grade, I put an anonymous love letter on the desk of the boy I liked. A girl who hated me saw it and ratted me out to the teacher. The teacher made me move my desk across the room while yelling that no one loved me and no one would ever love me. As an adult, I found out she was an alcoholic. In the 1st grade, I felt sick and my glands were swollen. I held up my hand and asked the teacher about it. She said it was probably because I was fat. It was the mumps and I ended up in the hospital. In the 4th or 5th grade, I was randomly looking down at my arm board in class and see a few raised dots on the inside of my elbow. I go to the teacher and say, I think I have chicken pox. She looks at it and says, that's not chicken pox. Go back to your seat. It was fucking chicken pox. Same teacher. I was looking out the window board again, I guess, and see smoke above the pine trees. I tell her, I think that is my house, that is close to where my house is. She, in all her wisdom, says, your house is not on fire. Go sit down. I got home from school and sure enough, it wasn't my house that had caught on fire. It was our shed. In primary school, and I had a massive migraine. Couldn't really focus and couldn't really move my neck either. Asked the teacher if I could go to the nurse, but he refused and said to lie your head on the desk, there is nothing wrong with you. Went home and ended up being taken to hospital, where I spent the next 3 days on a drip and under observation for suspected meningitis. Had a lumbar puncture where they drained my spinal fluid as no one knew what the hell was wrong with me. Nice of him to believe me. I've had plenty of these experiences myself, but I know my brother has had it worse. While he was in middle school, some kid slammed him up against some lockers and broke his arm. The principal refused to believe it was broken, but finally near the end of the day he called my mother. Before she had gotten there, the principal told my brother he was worthless and would never amount to anything. When my mother got there and found out, she laid into the principal. She stormed into the office in a rage, yelling who told my son he was worthless, who? That principal from then on was the nicest guy I had ever dealt with growing up in middle school. I have always been a voracious reader. When I was in elementary school, they had a series of books that you had to read and then do the answer sheet with those cool invisible pen things. We were encouraged to go at our own pace and turn them in as we finished. I thought they were interesting and fun, so I started in on them right away. I also thought they were easy. There were a total of 25 books in the series. I was on number 22 about halfway through the first term, before Christmas break. The teacher pulled me aside and said I was doing them too quickly and that I had to wait for the rest of the class to catch up. So while the other kids read their books, I had to sit at my desk for an hour or two each day and do nothing. I was not allowed to read, do homework, anything. The rest of the class never did catch up, and I finished the entire school year at the same place they stopped me. Too long, didn't read. I was punished for reading too quickly. It wasn't done to me, but rather something I witnessed. It was freshman or sophomore year in high school, and it was right before winter vacation. We had this one history teacher who was a total hard-ass that everyone hated, and one of the last days before break he came to school wearing a Santa outfit to accompany a lecture he did on the history behind Santa Claus, not Christmas, just Santa. Anyway, some kid was acting a fool in class that day, just generally being disruptive, and as the teacher was up walking around the class doing his lecture, the kid stood up behind him, and to this day, I don't know what set the teacher off. Maybe the kid threw something at him, maybe he said something to him, I don't really know. But the kid was right behind him, and the teacher turned around and put him in like an armbar headlock combo and proceeded to push him into a wall and then slam him onto a desk. The entire time he was doing it in his Santa costume still, mind you, he was yelling, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he seemed genuinely concerned for the kid's safety while still actively subduing him. I know that at one point in the teacher's life he had been in the military and a police officer, so maybe it was just a knee-jerk reaction to a perceived threat behind him. I don't really know. This teacher wasn't a small dude either. He was like 6'3" and fairly well built with somewhat hardened facial features. I will never forget Santa Claus assaulting a kid in my class while yelling, "Are you okay?" It was honestly one of the most bizarre, frightening, and unsettling things I had seen in my life up to that point. No one really said anything after the fact, and although the incident was reported to administration, I don't think any disciplinary action was taken, as he had been planning on retiring and moving out of state, and it was like his last week at the school. Crazy shit, man. In first grade, the teacher asked us to write a story about what we did that day. Being 6 years old, I wrote about how I ate a Kit Kat earlier that day. I remember feeling good about what I wrote because that's actually what I did. I handed my story into the teacher thinking I had done good when she grabs me up and takes me into her office. She told me to put my hands on her desk. She paddled me right there. I was so shocked. She told me that the story I had written was garbage and I would never amount to anything. Later on in third grade, we were reading out of a textbook. Every time the teacher would call on me, I couldn't find our place. She would call on me every other time. I tried as hard as I could but couldn't find where the other kids were reading in this book. Every time she would call on me, she would call me an idiot and ask me what's wrong with me. She had everyone in the class laughing at me. Near the end, she finally comes over to show me where to read. Turns out my book was a different revision from the others. So tells me to shut up and just listen until they can get me in book. No apology or anything. I missed the first day of a college class because I was attending my mother's funeral. I told him the reason why I was absent, to which he replied, "Well, I guess you can't use that excuse again, haha." I was still pretty much in shock, so I just looked at him blandly, then went and sat down. I would also like to point out that I found out over the course of the semester that the teacher wasn't an asshole, he was just completely clueless and socially awkward. Didn't happen to me, but in my class, my German teacher was a crazy lady. She always talked about how girls were better than guys, and she pulled the hair of her students, etc. This one time, she told us that cheese was a male word, because cheese has holes. Now, it was always deadly silent in her classroom, because we were 12 and fucking terrified of this teacher. Then, one kid mumbles, "But I thought women had more holes." Her face went pale, and without saying anything, she stood up, took a sponge, soaked it with water, and squeezed it in his sweater. I never laughed so hard. I peed my pants in first grade and ran from the classroom. I was sitting outside, scared to go back in. Teacher comes out and sits next to me, proceeds to tell me a story about how her uncle was sitting outside one day and was bitten by a snake and died. She said if I didn't come back inside, the same thing would happen to me. I will give her points for effectiveness, as it got me inside. But it's a pretty shitty thing to say to a first grader who was just socially traumatized in front of classmates. For the record, I live in Australia, so she was probably right. I had a teacher who was very hot, she knew it, and was a total bitch. I only had her for our homeroom period, so I didn't actually see her teach. Anyhow, she knew some kids in the class were being bullied by other kids and would often join in. One morning she was laying to one kid when he replies, "You fucking teach special ed, and you managed to fuck that up. You live with your parents, you're single, and you make less than a garbage man." She insta-teared and many lols were had. Other kids stopped picking on him too. I'll never forget her crying. In 6th grade I had a bitch of a teacher. I was playing paper football with 3 other guys at our table, something you can't possibly do alone. Well, the teacher comes over, grabs me by the shoulder and says she's sending me to the principal's office. I was shocked that I was the only one going for something so stupid. She wrote a note to the principal saying that she had repeatedly told me not to play paper football, which was a lie. The principal took this way too seriously. He then told me I would receive 3 hits from the paddle. Which fucking hurts. Been paddled one before but only hit once. I was shocked but asked if I could change into my jeans because I was still wearing my gym shorts. This is where it got fun. I ran the fuck out of that school. Was planning on running away. From what I heard, they looked everywhere for me in the school. I got lost walking around trying to find my way back home for a while. Jumped through a few yards and fields. Finally made it to a main highway where I was spotted by a state trooper. I took off running and hid in a small cove that was made from the area being bulldozed and a tree trunk being knocked over, making a little cave. Next thing I heard was dogs. Apparently an officer had a dog with him and came and sniffed me out. Had a rabid dog barking at me in the entrance of this little cove. They pulled me out, handcuffed me, and brought me back to school escorted by 2 police officers. I was walking back into school just when it was letting out, all muddy and handcuffed while being escorted by the 2 police officers. In the end, I was suspended for a week from school but never paddled. My parents didn't ground me or anything, and I got to stay home and play video games. After that, I pretty much became a legend at school as the kid who went fugitive. Sorry for the bad grammar. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. H, decided it would be a good idea once to tell all of us that she was a witch and that she got her powers from thunderstorms. A few days later, the power went out due to a thunderstorm. And I can still remember her cackle when it happened. Scared the ever-loving crap out of me. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like it. Subscribe to the channel and share your similar stories in the comments. See you soon.